In Salida, Colorado, where everyone knew everyone, nobody knew what was happening behind the perfect facade of Barry and Suzanne Morphew's marriage until she disappeared. When Suzanne Morphew didn't come home from her bike ride that spring morning in Salida, Colorado, nobody immediately assumed the worst. Bike rides were her escape, a way to find peace in the mountain air. But as hours passed without word from her, her family's concern deepened. When they found her bicycle abandoned on a remote trail, the reality of her disappearance hit home. Her daughters, Mallory and Macy, struggled to process what was happening. Their mother had always been their rock, dependable, loving, present for every moment that mattered. Barry, their father, called the police, his voice steady but strained as he reported his wife missing. In Salida, where everyone seemed to know everyone else, news of Suzanne's disappearance spread quickly. She wasn't someone who would just leave without telling anyone, especially not her daughters. The community mobilized immediately. The sheriff's department coordinated with local volunteers, and neighbors joined the search parties, combing through the trails and wooded areas surrounding the Morphew home. At first, everyone hoped they'd find her safe, perhaps injured but alive. Yet with each passing hour, that hope became harder to hold on to. As days went by, investigators began noticing problems with Barry's story. His account of his movements on the day Suzanne disappeared didn't match the evidence they were gathering. People noticed how his behavior shifted, from the anxious husband who made the 911 call to someone who seemed oddly detached from the search efforts. Those who knew Suzanne best started sharing concerning details with investigators. In recent months, she had pulled away from regular activities and seemed preoccupied. Close friends revealed that her marriage to Barry had become difficult. She had confided in a few trusted people about his angry outbursts and need to control various aspects of their lives. The image of Barry as a devoted father and businessman began to crack under scrutiny. A close friend remembered meeting with Suzanne just weeks before she vanished. During their conversation, Suzanne had seemed nervous, choosing her words carefully. She admitted things with Barry had gotten worse, and she was afraid of what might happen if she tried to end the marriage. Though she never directly said she was in danger, her friend could see the fear behind her forced smile. The contrast between Suzanne's public and private life became stark. While many knew her as an active, cheerful presence in the community, behind closed doors, she had been planning an escape from a situation she believed was dangerous. Investigators had to consider the difficult question: was Suzanne's disappearance really connected to a bike ride? Or was there a more deliberate explanation? Had she sensed something coming? As the investigation progressed, each new piece of evidence added to a troubling picture. The small town of Salida, which had come together hoping to find a missing neighbor, now had to face the possibility that something far worse had happened to Suzanne. The truth, whatever it might be, would change their community forever. The days after Suzanne Morphew's disappearance brought mounting questions. Law enforcement found critical flaws in Barry's story when surveillance footage showed his truck along Suzanne's bike route. At times he claimed to be elsewhere. This discovery shifted the investigation's focus, and the once beloved husband faced growing suspicion. Barry's behavior raised red flags. During questioning, he seemed oddly detached, his reactions inconsistent with those expected from a worried husband. His vague answers and body language made investigators increasingly suspicious. As the search for Suzanne expanded, evidence pointed to something more sinister. The bike path investigation yielded puzzling results. Though Suzanne's bicycle was found alongside the trail, there were no signs of struggle or accident, no broken branches, no disturbed underbrush. It was as if she had simply vanished. Suzanne's phone provided crucial evidence. Text messages to friends in the days before her disappearance revealed her troubled marriage. "I don't know how much longer I can keep going," she had written. "I'm scared. I just want out." These messages showed her growing fear of Barry, who should have been her protector. The case broke open when investigators searched Barry's property. His alibi crumbled after they discovered he'd visited an undisclosed area on their land. There, they found traces of blood on a stone, carefully wiped but still detectable. Tests confirmed it was Suzanne's. This discovery transformed the investigation. What began as a missing person case became a potential homicide. Forensic experts found signs of struggle near the bloodied stone. They were no longer searching for a missing woman. They were hunting a killer. Barry's behavior grew erratic. His media statements seemed calculated, despite his claims of desperation. "I just want my wife back. I'll do anything," he told reporters, but his cold eyes betrayed different emotions. Investigation into Barry's past revealed a pattern of volatile behavior and controlling relationships. Friends had noticed his temper, but never imagined he could be capable of violence. The evidence mounted, yet questions remained. Why wouldn't he confess? Why maintain an obviously failing story? The impact on Suzanne's daughters, Mallory and Macy, was devastating. They struggled to reconcile their loving father with a potential killer. The peaceful town of Salida reeled from the revelation that one of their own might have committed such a crime. As police pieced together Barry's history, one thing became clear. When the truth finally emerged, it would destroy everything this family once was. As weeks passed, the investigation into Suzanne's disappearance revealed darker truths. Though Barry's alibi had fallen apart, police still lacked concrete evidence of what happened to Suzanne. Then authorities discovered her journal, a private record that offered insight into her fears and thoughts. Her hurried entries revealed her marriage's toll. "Barry's anger is overwhelming," she wrote. "When it passes, it leaves nothing but destruction behind, and I'm always the one left to pick up the pieces." The journal showed what nobody had understood. Suzanne lived in constant fear of the man meant to protect her. Investigators uncovered Barry's history of controlling behavior and violence. Past incidents emerged, arguments with neighbors, heated confrontations with friends, and a report from Suzanne's sister who had witnessed his temper firsthand. Suzanne had endured long-term emotional abuse, reaching its peak just before she vanished. Most telling was the discovery that Suzanne had planned to leave Barry. Her journal detailed her preparations, finding a new home, securing finances, and plans to file for divorce. This threatened Barry's controlled world, pushing him to the edge as his dominance slipped away. Barry's behavior increasingly suggested a cover-up rather than genuine concern for his missing wife. His erratic actions and mounting evidence painted a picture of someone hiding dark secrets. Despite his lies, the truth was emerging, piece by disturbing piece. Detectives searched the property again, more thoroughly this time. They focused on a previously overlooked storage shed at the property's edge. Inside, they found damning evidence: Suzanne's clothes, a bloody shirt, and tools. The blood matched Suzanne's. But what chilled investigators most was finding a shovel near a fresh burial site, where disturbed earth covered a shallow grave. The grave proved Barry's ultimate betrayal, a wife murdered by the man who should have protected her. Evidence showed Suzanne had fought for her life, hadn't simply vanished, but had been killed. Barry's arrest came swiftly, but his calm demeanor disturbed officers. As they read his rights, he showed no emotion or remorse. He had lost control of what he considered his possession, and Suzanne had paid with her life. News of Suzanne's death and Barry's arrest shocked Salida. Neighbors and friends struggled to accept that the respected family man they knew had been a facade. No one had seen the violence within him until it was too late. For Suzanne's daughters, their pain went beyond losing their mother. Their father's betrayal cut deepest. The man they'd loved had destroyed their family. How could they understand why he'd killed their mother? How could they reconcile memories of their loving father with this murderer? As the town mourned and the trial approached, the true cost of Suzanne's death emerged. Beyond losing a wife and mother, a family had been destroyed, trust shattered, and a seemingly perfect life revealed as a nightmare. The trial would tell more than a story of murder or broken marriage. It revealed a life taken too soon and devastated everyone who loved Suzanne. The central question remained: why had Barry killed her simply for wanting to escape? The answer lay in Barry's nature. He feared losing control more than anything. When Suzanne found courage to leave, he chose to destroy rather than let go. The impact of Suzanne's death was felt throughout the community of Salida. The arrest of Barry, her seemingly perfect husband, stunned everyone. How could a man so active in local events, so charming in his interactions, and so dedicated to his children, be capable of murder? For those who had known Suzanne, the reality was hard to accept. She had been the heart of her family, quietly keeping things together, even when her own life was falling apart. Her friends remembered her as someone who would listen and offer comfort, but who rarely spoke of her own struggles. There had been hints during conversations over coffee or quiet phone calls, moments when she'd admitted feeling trapped in her marriage, but these warnings had gone unheeded. No one had realized the extent of her suffering. The tragedy wasn't just the loss of a mother, but how her life had ended, at the hands of someone who had promised to protect her. Her friends and family struggled with guilt. How had they missed the signs of a woman in desperation, too afraid to speak out? The pain spread beyond Suzanne's immediate circle. Barry's actions changed how neighbors viewed each other. People who had believed in the image of the perfect family now questioned everything they thought they knew. The emotional impact on Suzanne's daughters, Mallory and Macy, was severe. Their world had been upended. Their father was now their mother's killer. Every childhood memory became tainted by the truth of Barry's actions. They had believed in family love and security, but now faced a darker reality. Counseling became routine, but nothing could erase their trauma. The image of Barry, their former protector, standing before their mother's grave, haunted them. His detachment during the arrest, the coldness in his eyes. These moments played over in their minds alongside questions that had no answers. The funeral passed in a blur of faces and empty comfort. Suzanne's friends struggled to make sense of it all. The thought of her children growing up motherless, while Barry sat in jail, would stay with them forever. Suzanne had spent years silently trying to escape a life of emotional torment, only to have it end this way. As the trial approached, Barry's past revealed a pattern. Records showed his troubled family relationships and need to control situations. Instead of addressing his issues, he had manipulated those around him, creating a harmful relationship where he held all the power. In court, Barry's defense claimed he had acted in rage, that Suzanne's death wasn't planned, but the evidence proved otherwise. The town remained split. Some couldn't believe the Barry they knew could do this, while others had always seen through his charm. Barry's conviction for Suzanne's murder didn't end the story. The damage to her family and friends would take years to heal, if ever. The question lingered: could anyone truly move forward from such a profound loss? For the people of Salida, Suzanne's death showed how domestic violence can hide behind a perfect facade. Her story became a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous threats lie closest to home, masked by charm and respectability. The courtroom had barely emptied before the rumors began. Barry's conviction was swift, the evidence undeniable. In Salida, where everyone knew each other, this truth troubled the community. Behind Barry's perfect facade lay years of suppressed rage and manipulation. As details of his life emerged, people questioned what had driven him to murder. Was it just about losing control, or had violent tendencies been hidden beneath his charm? The man once seen as a pillar of the community, a loving father, devoted husband, and man of faith, was now exposed as an abuser who had hidden behind normalcy. Barry's background offered some insights. Raised in a family where emotions were suppressed and vulnerability was seen as weakness, he learned that love meant control. His father, stern and demanding, taught him that being a man meant being in charge and never showing weakness. Barry internalized these lessons, believing control was how you showed love. His marriage to Suzanne revealed these warped values. What started as protective behavior became possessiveness. Suzanne, once independent and vibrant, became the focus of his need to control. When she sought anything beyond his influence, career, friendships, or time alone, Barry saw it as a threat to his world. Suzanne had been trapped long before her death. Barry's manipulation was subtle. Comments that undermined her confidence, control disguised as concern, and gradual isolation, all while appearing to be a caring husband. Few noticed her gradual breakdown, how she became increasingly withdrawn. In private, Barry was different. His inner struggles emerged as sudden violence and unprovoked anger. His daughters, Mallory and Macy, lived with their father's unpredictable moods. They witnessed silent dinners, tense moments, and his rapid shifts from warmth to coldness. His presence loomed over their home, and though they learned to be careful, nothing could prevent the violence that eventually came. Sometimes Barry showed remorse, which kept Suzanne hoping he could change, that their family might heal. She often blamed herself for his outbursts, thinking if she were better, he wouldn't be so angry. She denied the growing problems in their marriage, clinging to hope even as things worsened. Investigators found a pattern of abuse in Barry's past, including previous relationships. He'd never been caught, his charm hiding his true nature. The truth emerged. Barry had been an abuser before marrying Suzanne. His ability to manipulate and control had always been there, unnoticed until too late. The trial divided the town. Some who knew Barry couldn't accept his guilt, while others, especially Suzanne's family and close friends, struggled to rebuild their lives. His life sentence brought little comfort to his daughters, who faced years of healing from growing up in a home where love had been twisted into control. The community still wondered, how had someone so respected become so dangerous? The answer lay in years of suppressed emotions, need for control, and steady deterioration of his mental state. The day of Suzanne's funeral brought a heavy silence to the neighborhood. The streets, usually filled with children's laughter and neighbors' greetings, felt empty. Life seemed to have stopped. For Suzanne's family, the grief went beyond losing a daughter, sister, and mother. They had lost the person who held their world together, and deep sadness took hold. Mallory and Macy carried their pain in ways that aged them beyond their years. Their lives had changed forever, their sense of safety destroyed by the violence that took their mother's life. This wasn't just about losing a parent. It was about losing who they were. Who could they be without their mother's strength and constant love? The girls struggled daily to understand what had happened. They held on to memories of laughter and warmth, but these were now shadowed by knowing their father had killed their mother. At night, they saw their father's face, once their protector, now someone they feared. They were haunted not just by his actions, but by how he had destroyed their trust in love and safety. Suzanne's mother, once strong and resilient, broke under the weight of losing her daughter. She spent hours lost in thought, trying to make sense of such cruelty. Suzanne had been her heart, and now all she had were memories, some beautiful, others painful, with the knowledge that her daughter's marriage had been a prison. She had never known the full extent of Barry's cruelty. Her father, usually stoic, became withdrawn. Guilt consumed him. Maybe if he had paid more attention, he could have saved his daughter. He wondered about missed signs, times Suzanne might have asked for help in ways he didn't understand. This regret followed him daily. The investigation continued to reveal disturbing details about Suzanne's life with Barry. They uncovered secrets she had kept and pain she had hidden. Her life had been darker than anyone knew. Beyond physical abuse, Barry's emotional abuse had changed who Suzanne was. Once optimistic and full of dreams, she had believed in change and love's power to heal. But Barry's constant manipulation had worn her down. His need to control and undermine her had turned a vibrant woman into someone who lived in fear and silence. Investigators found a pattern of manipulation and control. Barry had convinced Suzanne she was worthless without him, that his anger was her fault. Over time, she believed this, losing herself. When she finally reached out to family, the damage was done. This revelation devastated her family. They had seen problems in the marriage and felt tension, but missed the abuse happening behind closed doors. Understanding the depth of her suffering brought fresh grief. They had lost Suzanne long before her death. The question remained, how had Barry hidden his true nature? How had he controlled everyone, including Suzanne, without raising suspicion? Investigation showed Barry hadn't simply snapped. His destructive behavior had been building for years. His charm let him hide in plain sight. He played the perfect husband, father, and neighbor until it was too late. As Suzanne's story came to light, her family faced the task of understanding the woman they had only begun to know. As investigators uncovered the truth about Suzanne's death, the town struggled with shared disbelief. No one could understand how the image of a perfect family had hidden such violence. Barry, once the friendly neighbor, was now at the center of a terrible crime. His arrest shocked the community, leaving everyone wondering, how had Suzanne, known for her warmth and kindness, met such a tragic end? The truth proved complex. Investigators found disturbing patterns in Barry's past behavior that showed years of control and manipulation. The family home, once seen as peaceful, now revealed signs of abuse behind its walls. Suzanne had endured emotional abuse alone, suffering without anyone noticing her pain. Her friends and family struggled with guilt about missing the signs. There had been moments when Suzanne seemed distant, tired, and withdrawn. Her smile often seemed forced, her laughter hollow. But no one had questioned deeply enough. They'd assumed she would eventually find help, but the abuse had overwhelmed her before she could escape. Barry was skilled at manipulation. He had convinced everyone that Suzanne caused his anger. He made her believe she was worthless and needed his approval. He used her love against her, building such guilt and shame that she couldn't seek help. She feared judgment, worried people would say she was overreacting or imagining things. Yet Suzanne had tried to break free. In her final months, she started secret therapy sessions, attempting to rebuild her confidence. She confided in a few close friends about her marriage, quietly sharing her fears about Barry. These small steps towards independence proved dangerous. Barry noticed these changes in Suzanne, how she began standing up for herself, how her confidence was returning. He saw her growing independence as a threat and reacted violently. Her death wasn't sudden. It followed years of Barry's need to control her. When he felt that control slipping, he turned deadly. Each new discovery brought more pain to Suzanne's family. They'd sensed problems in her marriage, but never imagined Barry's calculated cruelty. They'd believed love could overcome anything, but seeing how Barry had twisted love into something harmful shattered that belief. The family now faced difficult questions about their role. Had they missed obvious signs? Could they have helped her? These questions would haunt them. Despite their love for Suzanne, it hadn't been enough to save her. The case against Barry grew strong. Medical records showed years of unexplained injuries. Her therapy notes revealed deep trauma from years of manipulation. Witnesses had seen Barry's outbursts and heard his cruel words, but no one had confronted him or asked Suzanne if she needed help. The community had stayed silent, and her family had tried to protect her without understanding the real danger. In court, Barry's charm failed him. His careful image crumbled as evidence mounted. The respected neighbor was exposed as an abuser, but even his conviction brought little peace to Suzanne's family. Her death had devastatingly changed their lives. They lost someone full of life, love, and dreams, left only with memories and painful truth about her final years. The town fell quiet after the trial. The impact of Suzanne's death felt throughout the community. Life continued, but things had changed forever. For Suzanne's family, each day brought a struggle to find normalcy. Her absence left an ache that time couldn't heal. Even their rare moments of joy felt incomplete. Her mother, Mary, suffered deeply. Suzanne had been her only child, and the loss created a wound that wouldn't close. Every photo, memory, and familiar place they'd shared now brought pain. Part of her felt missing. Questions haunted her. What signs had she missed? How hadn't she seen the abuse? Could she have saved her daughter? These thoughts followed her constantly. Mary often sat in Suzanne's old room, surrounded by remnants of her daughter's life, books on shelves, letters from friends, framed photos. Suzanne had loved reading, always dreaming of distant places. Now those dreams would remain unfulfilled. She was gone, leaving only memories behind. Thomas, her father, dealt with grief differently. He withdrew to his workshop, finding peace in woodworking. The sound of his hammer, the motion of sanding. These simple tasks helped quiet his turmoil. He couldn't discuss his daughter's death, even with his wife. The pain was too fresh. He'd always been the family's protector, but now felt helpless. This failure haunted him daily. For Barry, Suzanne's husband, the investigation marked the start of his downfall. The trial exposed his true nature, and the community turned against him. His neighbors avoided him, refusing to acknowledge their past connections. He'd gone from respected community member to someone people feared. Barry showed no real understanding of his actions. In his mind, Suzanne had driven him to violence. He denied responsibility, his self-centered view blocking any guilt. In prison, he remained silent about the murder, disconnected from the pain he'd caused. To him, none of it was his fault. The emotional impact grew heavier on Suzanne's family as time passed. Mary battled depression, struggling with sleep and lost in memories. Some days she couldn't leave home, finding even basic interactions too difficult. Her grief felt overwhelming. Thomas changed completely. His once cheerful personality faded into constant sadness. Looking at Suzanne's daughter, Mia, brought fresh waves of regret, reminders of what could have been. Mia had been Suzanne's reason for living, and now she faced life without her mother. The thought that he might have prevented this tormented Thomas. 8-year-old Mia seemed to grasp more than expected. She lost not just her mother, but her sense of safety. She became quiet and withdrawn, her bright spirit dimmed. She stayed close to her grandmother Mary, seeking comfort in familiarity, but nothing could fully ease her pain. At such a young age, Mia had to face life's cruelest side. The investigation revealed the extent of Suzanne's suffering, daily moments of fear, manipulation, and isolation. She'd been living in fear for years, unsure who to trust. Yet she had fought back in small ways, trying to reclaim herself. She sought therapy and confided in friends, attempting to break free. This resistance ultimately led to her death. The investigation into Suzanne's death continued as new evidence emerged daily. For Mary and Thomas, waiting for answers felt endless, the truth remaining just out of reach. While the trial had been public, the real story lay deeper. In the marks left on Suzanne's life, her strained relationships, and the lies she'd lived with. Detective Rachel Lewis, leading the investigation, found troubling inconsistencies. Initially, police focused on obvious evidence, Barry being the last to see Suzanne alive, and physical evidence linking him to her death. But as Rachel investigated further, something felt wrong. Suzanne's relationship with Barry showed a pattern of abuse. He had controlled her movements until she became withdrawn and isolated. Rachel's decade of police work hadn't prepared her for this case. Beyond the crime's violence lay hidden signs of long-term abuse. She studied Suzanne's journals, letters, and text messages that now revealed new meaning. A pattern emerged. Suzanne had tried escaping for years, reaching out when possible, but faced increasing isolation and control. The text messages told the clearest story. In her final months, Suzanne had told friends about growing tensions with Barry and hostility at home. She described feeling trapped, constantly watched, facing Barry's unpredictable anger. She mentioned plans to leave, only to stay when Barry promised change and therapy. These promises kept her trapped, while Barry maintained control. Rachel felt angry reading the messages. How many women suffered similarly? How many were silenced, their calls for help ignored? Suzanne had fought back, but the impact of the abuse eventually overwhelmed her. Now much of the truth remained hidden, beyond what the trial had revealed. Rachel discovered how isolated Suzanne had become. Friends and family missed signs of control and fear. Mary and Thomas trusted their daughter, but couldn't see past her careful disguise. Suzanne, ashamed, hadn't admitted her promising marriage had become a mental trap. Yet sometimes truth emerged. Brief moments when Suzanne sought help or showed cracks in her outward appearance. These instances revealed her attempts to regain control and find herself. She had long planned to leave, but couldn't escape safely. Visiting the house again, Rachel found new evidence. Though Barry was arrested, the home held more secrets. The room arrangements and furniture placement seemed strategic. The living room felt sterile, with photos showing a happy family that never existed. Barry had maintained this image, even as Suzanne's well-being declined. In the bedroom, Rachel found a hidden journal in the closet, Suzanne's final record. Its pages documented her trapped existence. Each entry showed her seeking help and understanding her situation. She described small acts of resistance rather than dramatic escape attempts. One entry stood out. Weeks before her death, Suzanne wrote about Barry, admitting he knew his actions were harmful. He justified it, claiming he loved her too much to risk losing her. This revealed Barry wasn't acting blindly, but deliberately, understanding his abuse while continuing it. His confession wasn't remorse. It was his final control tactic. For Rachel, this discovery marked just the beginning. The full story of Suzanne's life and suffering was still unfolding. As the investigation unfolds, the truth becomes clear. Barry had carefully planned Suzanne's abuse as a means of calculated control. Police uncover evidence of years of mental abuse that left Suzanne in such a vulnerable state that she lost hope. He convinced himself he was protecting her, a belief he held for years. To him, her death seemed inevitable, the result of what he saw as love and duty. Detective Marshall finds the final evidence in letters from the attic. Suzanne had written to her family about her fears and feeling trapped. Yet she never directly blamed Barry. Her silence revealed the depth of her fear. She seemed to have given up on escaping his control. Detective Marshall wonders how Suzanne endured such abuse for so long without seeking help. Had her love for her children and hope for normalcy kept her going through the worst times, or had it just delayed the inevitable breakdown? Her family finds no comfort in Barry's arrest, only deep sorrow that they'll never fully understand. Her children, now in their late teens and early 20s, struggle with loss, guilt, and anger. They had loved their mother, but never knew her suffering. What they saw as odd behavior, her distance, her anxiety, were signs of abuse, hidden by fear and manipulation. At her grave, they realize how little they knew about her life, and this truth hurts deeply. They mourn both her death and the years of silence that kept them from seeing her pain. Suzanne had been a mother, wife, and daughter, but the woman who suffered remained hidden behind these roles. Her children now face rebuilding their understanding of a life taken from them, one they never truly knew. The years that followed Suzanne's death left a void her family could never fill. As the investigation concluded and Barry was sentenced, the community offered sympathy, but it all felt hollow. No amount of justice could undo Suzanne's years of suffering, nor ease her children's guilt. They wondered, could they have done more? Could they have seen the signs earlier? The answers remained elusive, haunting their quiet moments alone. For her children, each anniversary of her death reminded them of the life they'd lost, and the woman they'd never truly known. They would look through old photos, letters, and memories, but nothing answered their questions. Suzanne had been a devoted mother, always present, yet they'd missed the pain she had hidden. She had become distant in her own home, her laughter rare, her eyes showing unspoken fears. Their guilt grew knowing Suzanne had tried protecting them until the end. In her final months, she'd planned their future escape from Barry's control, hoping they'd live free from the impact of his abuse. But even after her death, Barry's influence kept affecting their decisions and choices. His actions had shaped their lives, leaving them struggling in a world that felt strange and unfamiliar. Detective Marshall, thinking about the case years later, wondered if anyone could have saved Suzanne. Could someone have seen past the false appearance Barry created? Could anyone have reached her in time? He knew there were no simple answers, given the complex mix of fear, love, and manipulation that had trapped her for so long. Ultimately, Suzanne's story showed the cost of silence, not just her inability to speak out, but the silence of those around her who could have asked questions or noticed cracks in her outward appearance. Everyone had played a part, knowingly or not. While Barry served his sentence, diminished from his former self, Suzanne's family tried to rebuild. But some wounds never heal completely, and some scars remain. Her children would carry their mother's death as more than tragedy, as a reminder of a life lived in fear and misunderstanding. They learned that sometimes the deepest hurts are invisible, and the most painful truths go unspoken.